Sometimes life whispers, and sometimes it screams, that some people simply don't belong in our destiny. However, despite the obvious signs, many of us stubbornly stay, ignoring intuitive warnings, and find ourselves in relationships that slowly but surely erode us from within. These connections are emotionally draining, disorienting, and most painfully detach us from our own true essence. As Louise Hay, the renowned author and pioneer in personal development, said, "Our relationships are not random. They are a mirror reflecting our inner world." But why is it so difficult for us to break a connection when it clearly causes harm? Why do we cling to those who, deep down, don't nurture us or contribute to our growth? It's important to understand that the connections we make are not accidental. We attract certain relationships because on some level, consciously or unconsciously, they resonate with our inner wounds, with beliefs we still carry within us. If you find yourself in a painful relationship today, don't dismiss it as mere coincidence. It's more likely a wake-up call, an opportunity to look within, to explore those corners of your soul that need attention, acceptance, and healing. And most importantly, it's the perfect moment to honestly ask yourself if you are willing to continue supporting this story. One of the most obvious signals that our body and mind send us is emotional exhaustion. Perhaps you've noticed that after talking to or interacting with a certain person, you feel drained, demotivated, or inexplicably anxious. This is not random. It's the voice of your inner wisdom, an energy that tells you that this relationship is not aligned with your well-being. Louise Hay emphasized that harmony with oneself feels like inner peace, and healthy relationships should be the same: light, natural, and free from unnecessary tension. There should be no need to constantly be on guard, walk on eggshells, or wear a mask to earn acceptance. If a connection requires you to give up a part of yourself to maintain it, that's a clear sign of imbalance. When we repeatedly find ourselves in painful relationships, it's not just an unfortunate coincidence. It's more likely an urgent call to pay attention to those aspects of our personality that we've long tried to hide. It's time to carefully analyze which of our traits contribute to maintaining these destructive cycles. Perhaps we are desperately seeking approval from others. Or are we driven by a deep-seated fear of being rejected and abandoned? It's possible that we subconsciously believe we are unworthy of better treatment and a happier life. All these questions, however unpleasant they may seem, contain invaluable information for self-discovery and personal growth. There is a subtle but very strong discomfort that arises when something in our life doesn't align with our true nature, our deep values. It's that inexplicable feeling that something is wrong, something doesn't fit, even if everything looks fine on the surface. Does this feeling sound familiar? You are in a relationship. There are no obvious conflicts or disagreements, but inside you, anxiety, a sense of alienation, and discomfort are growing. This is your inner compass, your most reliable guide, trying to warn you of impending pain before it becomes unbearable. Let's return to the main theme. It's important to realize that we often mistakenly take attachment for love. We desperately cling to another person, not because we are connected by genuine unconditional love, but because of fear of loneliness, of the emptiness that may arise if this person leaves our life. However, true love is born from freedom, not from need. To love truly is to consciously choose to be with someone, not to depend on their presence for a sense of self-worth. If the mere thought of life without this person fills you with panic, if it seems that without them everything will lose meaning, perhaps it's worth stopping and honestly asking yourself, is what I'm feeling love or fear? It is here that Louise Hay's wise words once again illuminate our path. Often we attract people into our lives who, like a mirror, reflect our unhealed wounds, our deepest fears, our unresolved internal conflicts and complexes. And if we don't recognize this mechanism, we risk perpetuating relationships that only exacerbate these wounds instead of helping us heal them. Before asking whether to avoid a certain person, it's worth considering another, deeper question. What lessons does this relationship teach me about myself? Perhaps they indicate that the fear of rejection still hinders the establishment of personal boundaries, or that the need for external approval has not disappeared due to insufficient self-confidence. Perhaps they expose an old wound that needs healing. And here's where it gets interesting. When you begin to perceive relationships as a mirror reflecting your own personal growth, the desire to blame the other person for your discomfort disappears. A sense of your own strength returns, which has always been within. The understanding comes that it is not about changing the other person, but about defining the boundaries of what is acceptable and being ready to heal. Making the decision to distance yourself from someone is not an easy task. The ego will use all available tools: fear, guilt, confusion. But when self-love becomes a priority, everything changes. In moments of doubt, the mind begins to generate countless scenarios. We begin to imagine scenarios in which the other person changes, in which everything works out, or we convince ourselves that the problem is actually within ourselves. But amidst this chaos of thoughts, the truth breaks through. If a relationship constantly makes you feel insignificant, embarrassed, empty, or sad, then no additional reasons are needed to leave. You need courage to put yourself first and say to yourself, "I deserve better." Louise Hay said that by getting rid of what does not correspond to our energy, we free up space for something new and better. This principle applies not only to romantic relationships, but also to friendships, social circles, and the work environment. Any connection that forces you to betray your true essence or limits your inner growth is a signal for change. When situations arise in your life that force you to wear someone else's mask for approval, when you repeatedly find excuses for the actions of those who hurt you, or when a relationship pulls you backward instead of forward, this is a clear signal. It's time to stop and listen to yourself. The universe is constantly sending us signs, and discomfort is one of the most eloquent. As Louise Hay wisely noted, our emotions are messengers of the soul. When something in our life comes into dissonance with our inner well-being, we feel it with our whole being. Of course, the decision to let go can be painful. It's scary to admit that a certain stage is coming to an end. You may be overcome by fears, a sense of emptiness, and uncertainty. But this is where great strength lies. Every time you put your inner world above drama and chaos, life generously rewards you with deeper and more conscious relationships, authentic experiences, and an unbreakable connection with yourself. It is important to remember what we often forget. Saying goodbye is not a manifestation of resentment or selfishness. Letting go of a person who no longer brings positivity into your life does not mean that they are bad. It only says that their presence no longer corresponds to your life path. People change, and you change with them. Sometimes our paths diverge not because of a lack of love, but because a certain chapter in our life has come to its logical conclusion. Our subconscious, as Louise Hay insightfully noted, also communicates with us through internal resistance, that struggle of the mind that arises when we think about distancing ourselves from someone. A part of us desperately clings to the hope that if we put in a little more effort, everything will surely work out. But the reality is that true growth should not feel like a never-ending battle. Personal development should not be like a nagging wound that just won't heal. Of course, difficulties arise in any relationship. But there is a huge difference between jointly overcoming obstacles and artificially maintaining a connection that has long since been severed in your heart. The signs are always there, patiently waiting for you to dare to see them. It's the lack of enthusiasm at the thought of meeting a certain person, the emotional baggage you carry after every conversation, the moments of sadness you desperately try to ignore, finding all sorts of excuses and convincing yourself that everything is fine, while your heart has long since said a firm no. Sometimes maintaining such a connection turns into a daily struggle, as if each meeting steals a piece of your energy, as if you are paying a silent price to keep alive a relationship that has long since withered. But when relationships are healthy, they fill you up, nourish you, allow you to breathe fully. You don't have to sacrifice your well-being to maintain them. And this applies to all kinds of connections, even those we have with people whom we think we love, or with whom we feel a deep connection. When you encounter repeated episodes of pain caused by another person, the moment has come for deep self-analysis. Ask yourself the most important question: what aspects of my personality are reflected in this painful experience? It is quite possible that this person is acting as a mirror, reflecting your insecurity in establishing healthy boundaries. Perhaps they are exposing old emotional wounds that are still bleeding, pointing to unmet needs that you have not learned to provide for yourself, or revealing unconscious, repetitive patterns of behavior. By adopting this perspective, inspired by the philosophy of Louise Hay, you will discover how your perception changes. You will stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and begin to understand that everything that happens serves your growth and development. You regain the lost sense of control over your life and realize that everyone who appears on your life path plays a certain role. Some come to stay forever, while others are called to teach you a valuable lesson before disappearing. And when their mission is completed, life sends you clear signals, even if you are not yet ready to accept the separation. At this crucial moment, you have to make a choice, whether to continue clinging to the familiar, even if it is painful, or to take a bold step into the unknown, believing that you deserve more. Holding on may seem like the easier option, as it is familiar and predictable, albeit painful. But letting go is an act of faith, a manifestation of trust in life and, above all, in yourself. It means recognizing that not all relationships and situations are meant to last forever. It means being confident that the space that is freed up will not be a loss, but will open doors to something new, more suitable, and more sincere. Throughout our lives, we meet many people. Some become an integral part of our story, while others accompany us only at certain stages of the journey. Some show us what true love is, while others point out areas where we still need to heal. Some people come into our lives to give us love, others to remind us of the pain we have not yet overcome. But all, without exception, come with a specific mission: to teach us something important. When a relationship has exhausted its original purpose, life begins to send signs, sometimes subtle, sometimes very insistent, hinting at the end of a certain stage. The biggest mistake we can make is to ignore these signals. Do not desperately cling to what no longer resonates with your inner world, just because you are afraid of being alone. As Louise Hay rightly stated, the real danger lies not in loneliness, but in being surrounded by people who hinder your self-expression and personal growth. At the same time, the value of a relationship is determined not by the length of its existence, but by the significance it had on your life path. It happens that a person is present in your life for many years, but never provides the necessary emotional support. At the same time, a fleeting encounter can completely change your worldview. The soul does not recognize calendar dates, it only values genuine connections. Personal growth is impossible without the ability to let go. To move forward, you need to break free from the old. You cannot fill your life with new experiences if you are still holding on to what has already served its function. Just as trees shed their leaves in autumn, not out of humility, but out of the need to prepare for spring rebirth, so you need to learn to let go, not out of pain, but out of wisdom. Letting go of the past can seem daunting. It confronts us with emptiness, with an unknown space, with that uncomfortable pause between what is leaving and what has not yet arrived. But this space is not a loss, but fertile ground, a blank canvas, an opportunity for a new beginning. When you trust life and take a step forward without having all the answers, it surprises you. New people appear, new opportunities open up, and most importantly, you find yourself again. Louise Hay reminded us that every time we act out of love for ourselves, life works out in our favor. Therefore, the main question is not, is it easy, but is it worth it? Is it worth staying in a relationship that dims your inner light just because of the fear of the unknown? Is it worth ignoring your intuition to avoid change? Is it worth sacrificing your development because of the fear of temporary discomfort associated with separation? Instead of resisting the signals, perceive them as valuable clues. Each signal is a compass pointing the way to your true purpose. Life does not seek to deprive you of anything or punish you. On the contrary, it wants to free you from what no longer supports, limits, and corresponds to your soul. However, this decision must be made by you, and it must be done not sometime later, but right now. The longer you delay action, the more difficult the situation becomes. Signals that today seem like minor inconveniences can escalate into serious crises tomorrow. Initially, it might just be a slight doubt, an unpleasant conversation, or a mild ailment that you dismiss. However, if you ignore these signs, they will intensify, transforming into more significant conflicts and difficult lessons designed to force you to pay attention to what you have been avoiding for so long. The feeling that something no longer fits, the intuitive understanding that a person no longer resonates with you, is not a figment of your imagination. It is your true self nudging you toward change, your inner essence calling you to grow. Yet often fear prevails. We prefer to convince ourselves that everything is fine, that we can continue to endure, that things will improve over time, even though deep down we already know the truth. There comes a moment when we realize a relationship is ending, sensing that its purpose has been fulfilled. The former spark fades, turning into emptiness. Lively conversations are replaced by strained phrases, laughter becomes rare, and arguments seem endless. This is not a call for a fierce battle, but a signal of the need to close this chapter. Breaking up is not a defeat, but an act of self-love, as wisely emphasized by Louise Hay. It is a conscious choice in favor of your own development, respect for your own path, and faith in a better future that will only be possible after freeing yourself from what has outlived its usefulness. Ending a relationship does not diminish the time spent together and does not indicate a mistake. It is an acknowledgement of valuable experience and personal growth. It is an opportunity to gratefully let go of the past, without burdening yourself with what is no longer relevant. Sometimes letting go seems like surrender, but it requires tremendous courage, especially when it comes to people dear to us, with whom there is no longer mutual benefit. Louise Hay reminds us that change begins with listening to yourself. The subconscious signals a problem when you feel diminished in a relationship, forced to hide your true self and dim your inner light. If every conversation becomes a burden and anxiety replaces peace, your inner voice already knows the truth, even if you are not yet ready to accept it. The problem is that we often ignore these signs because acknowledging a problem requires action, and action requires making difficult decisions. How often do we forgive those who cause us pain? How often do we turn a blind eye to what is happening just to avoid facing a painful reality? We cling to memories of happy moments, trying to justify what no longer works. But the truth is, when something changes, it will never be the same. Holding on to memories of the past prevents us from fully living in the present. Healthy relationships are spaces for growth, where you can breathe freely and be yourself. There is no room for masks, conforming to others' expectations, or pretense. If you feel the need to constantly suppress yourself, hide your true feelings, then you cannot flourish in such an environment. If being with someone makes you doubt yourself, perhaps your soul should look for another place. Fear will try to hold you back, whispering about loneliness, misunderstanding, and exaggerations. But this is a lie. It is not the other person holding us back, but the story we have created about needing someone to feel complete. Yes, life will change after the breakup, but that is not necessarily bad. It could be the beginning of something bigger, something real, something that aligns with your true purpose. It is impossible to unlock your potential when surrounded by people pulling you back to a past version of yourself. Sometimes we feel guilty for wanting to distance ourselves, for recognizing the difference in our goals and aspirations. But this is not selfishness. It is evolution. As Louise Hay said, by honoring your truth, you begin to live an authentic life. The subconscious tirelessly shows us the way through the sadness that accompanies even a strained smile, through the fatigue that arises after a seemingly peaceful day, through the inner whisper about something more waiting for us. Ignoring these signs, life turns up the volume, putting us in a situation where it is impossible to continue hiding the truth. The discomfort becomes unbearable, and what was once tolerated without objection now presses down like a stone on the chest. There comes a turning point when there are only two paths. Continue to deny your feelings, follow a path that does not align with your essence, or muster the courage to face the truth and choose yourself. After all, sometimes rejection is not a rejection of love, but a rejection of fear. If you feel a constant struggle, give all your energy, and still fail, perhaps it is time to ask yourself, is it worth continuing? This is not a call to escape from difficulties, but a realization that arises after you have done everything possible, but your soul continues to ask for liberation. Letting go does not mean ceasing to love. It means loving yourself enough to no longer harm yourself in order to maintain a connection that doesn't nourish your soul. It's about respecting your growth, recognizing that what's meant for you will come without force, without effort. Indeed, there comes a time when you must acknowledge that what you are giving up no longer serves your development. If your inner voice persistently whispers, your body responds with tension, and your intuition becomes relentless, it may be time to stop ignoring these signals. Stop, take a deep breath, and listen to yourself with an open heart. Energy can no longer hide the truth. Perhaps the perfect moment has arrived to choose yourself, to believe that by releasing what no longer resonates with your soul, you open the door to new possibilities. Yes, admitting that something is ending can be difficult. The ego clings to the familiar, the mind seeks justifications, and the heart is tormented by doubts. But as Liz Gilbert wisely noted, letting go is not the end, but merely a transition, a harbinger of new discoveries. By going through this process with self-love, you will find that a life awaits you that is much more aligned with your true essence. Sometimes the signal doesn't come as a deafening cry, but as a persistent feeling. When what once brought joy now only causes exhaustion, when the burden of the past becomes heavier than the present, when with each passing day you drift further away from yourself, these are clear signs that it's time to act. There is no need to look for excuses, mask discomfort, or wait for changes that you yourself do not believe in. Choosing yourself is not a sign of selfishness, but a sign of emotional maturity. It means saying to yourself, I deserve relationships that uplift me, broaden my horizons, and inspire me to be who I truly am. Don't settle for less. Don't stay in spaces that dim your light, diminish you, and distance you from your true essence. There comes an amazing moment when you finally decide to let go of the past. It's like being freed from shackles, returning to yourself, to the source of your life force. You feel a surge of energy, lightness in your body, and clarity of thought, as if the heavy burden you have carried on your shoulders for so long begins to dissolve into the air. At first, it may not be easy, and it is natural to feel pain, because letting go is always painful. But remember that the pain of liberation is only temporary, while the pain of staying in a situation that no longer suits you can haunt you forever. These words are addressed to those who have long remained silent, bearing an unbearable burden. To those who realize the need to complete a certain stage in life, but cannot find the courage to take the final step. And of course, this is a reminder that you are not alone in your experiences. Each of us at some point has faced fear, resistance, and an inner voice that persistently says, it's time to leave, even if feelings are still strong. But the most important thing is not what you leave behind, but what awaits you ahead. And I dare to assure you that if you choose your own peace and well-being, the future will bring you something much more wonderful than you can imagine now.